Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the Deep Dive Pop Culture Podcast from Nerdist. My name's Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. Folks, this week, once again, I'm joined by comic book aficionado, Nerdist's longtime writer who knows a ton about comics and just loves them to pieces. You know him from the show. Welcome back to the show, Eric Diaz. Hey, man. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Very excited to talk once again about Batman. I feel like X-Men and Batman are the two things you and I talk about the most in real life and on the show.
Yep.
But we were both, this episode we're going to talk about Batman CAPED Crusader, which is on Prime Video, which you can watch all 10 episodes. Highly recommended. We'll get into, I guess, the little, the backstory of it, which is that it was meant to be a Max show. And then with all the David Zaslav, malarkey, it ended up, they sold it off. I was very worried that they were just going to scrap it, but it had been, I think it was basically done as far as I know. So they were able to just sell it to Prime, who bought it very willingly. And yeah, so it's a different take on Batman, which we'll get into, but it's also kind of similar in a lot of ways. So we'll talk about that. But before we get into it, I do want to say, we talked about this last week with Hector about Deadpool and Wolverine. But what I'm going to ask everybody from now until the end of time. But what was your initial take when you heard that Robert Downey Jr. was going to play Dr. Doom?
It made sense to me. I'm not upset about it. I know a lot of people are. People are like, well, they're desperate. I'm like, well, yeah, they are desperate. Right. It makes sense that they would lean into that. I have ideas for how that works, instantly. Making him a Tony Stark variant. I think he's still Victor Von Doom. They've said he's Victor Von Doom. And I'm like, all right, well, I know how that works already in my head. The Winter Soldier was sent to kill his parents in 1991 when he was a teenager. Okay, well, what if in an alt timeline that happened in the 70s when he's a baby in Latveria on a business trip with his dad, and someone adopts him, and that's it. There you go. He's still, because Doom and Tony have a lot of similarities as characters, beyond just they're in iron suits. It's the hubris, but Tony had a better moral compass because he was, not raised by, crazy people or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it doesn't bother me. I can see where it would be good, especially since every version of Doom that we've had so far on film has been truly terrible. So I'm just excited about, a good actor is going to do it. A proven good actor is going to play Doom. Cool. It might be bad, but I'm definitely wait and see. I'm not shutting it down instantly. I'm very curious, and certainly it's going to have people talking from a business point of view. I get why they did it. People will be talking about it for the next 2 years, and it also saves them a lot of setup because we're familiar. If it's a Tony variant in any way, we're familiar enough with Tony from all these years of Marvel that he doesn't need the idea of it's Tony, but he went in a different direction. Doesn't need a lot of setup. Not like Thanos had it. People talk a lot about how, well, Thanos had all these years. I'm like, Thanos appeared in 2 post-credit scenes that were less than a minute long and a 1-minute scene in Guardians before Infinity War.
Yeah.
He really didn't have a ton to do in terms of setup. So it's the same to me. They don't need that much. But no, I'm stoked. I'm stoked for what they might do, and it might be bad, it might be good, but I'm not actively angry about it.
No. Yeah, there's sort of there's the cynical business side of the decision that is always what I'm going to be I'll roll my eyes about. Do we really need to spend all this money to get back these directors and actor that we've already spent a lot of time with? And then there's if it's a good movie or if they are good movies, it doesn't matter what they did. Doesn't matter in general, but I think it's much more. It's kind of two brains. All we can talk about now is because we don't know the creative, so it'll just be I guess we have to wait for 2 years before we actually know. Unless he shows up in Fantastic Four next year.
I think he'll be the post credits of Fantastic Four. I've heard that all over, and it sounds right. Fantastic Four is what I'm excited about. Everything about that looks super up my alley. That, I saw the leaked footage and it was all this retro 60s mid-century stuff, and Like, I love that.
Yeah,
Like, I'm all
me
about that.
too.
So
I'm very stoked about that, and also like, um, you and I offline have talked about this, but like, uh, knowing sort of that they're basing part of the story on Fantastic Four life story, which is a really interesting book.
yeah,
Um, you can kind of see that in what they've already released and what they've kind of shown is that like these were, you know, there's going to be a long game of Galactus and everything like that, which is just basically the entirety of what Life Story is about, is Reed being
yeah,
obsessed with Galactus and his
yeah, because he
eventual
knows it's
arrival.
coming. Yeah, he
Yeah.
knows Galactus is coming, and I think they're going with that.
Yeah.
Um, for sure. And I think Galactus, I mean, based on nothing, I think Galactus is going to win in this movie. I think Galactus is going to destroy their Earth, which will be pretty shocking,
There
Um,
was leave it to me, of course, to always reference Doctor Who, but there was a really one of my favorite Doctor Who stories ever from the 70s, early 70s. It's called Inferno, where the Doctor is trying to during this period of time, he's exiled on Earth, and so he's trying to figure out a way to make his TARDIS work again. He, instead of going forward or backwards in time, he goes sideways into another dimension, and it's a version of the world that is dystopic and terrible, and like, and it's they're in his world. There's a drill that's going under the Earth, and weird stuff starts to happen the further down into the center of the Earth they get. Where he ends up in this dystopian version of it, they're a little bit further ahead. And so basically what happens by the end of that is that world succumbs to the evils of whatever that's inside the Earth and like basically explodes. And then he goes back to main Earth and has a little bit extra time to try to stop it. And I think that kind of aspect of it, of what you're saying, makes a lot of sense, which is that we need to see how bad Galactus actually is. If he's
yes,
defeated instantly, then we don't, what's the point?
right.
Like, we need to be able to see how much, like, and that's the same thing with Infinity War. Like, we saw Thanos
Hmm.
win, and that shows you what the stakes are. And so
Yeah,
obviously they're not going to destroy Earth 616,
no,
but they can destroy
not
this
yet.
alternate
No,
variation in the Fantastic Four movie. So yeah, I'm jazzed. I think it'll be really fun.
yeah,
And also the
yeah.
fact that Mr. Fantastic is like a Mr. Wizard style like TV presenter, I think
Oh,
is
I
really cute.
loved that. I loved all of that. And them on the dating game and just like that aesthetic,
Yeah.
everything about it. I love that Mad Men era of just Americana. So like, I
Yeah.
love it. Um, and back to like, the doomsday of it all. Like, I think the most important person coming back is McFeely. I think it's McFeely who's coming back because
Yeah.
I think,
He is.
I know I'm not sure if his writing partner is, but like what they had to do in those movies have a lot of characters and they juggle
Yeah.
them pretty well. Like they kind of all have moments in those movies, like, and I think that that's the most important thing, more important than who directs it, is can someone write
By
all of
far.
these, because now they're saying like there's going to be 60 characters between these two movies. And I'm like, well, if maybe if this guy writes it. So I'm not, you know, that's the most important person coming back to me. And it's not the splashy announcement. Nobody really cares about the writers, unfortunately, but I think that's kind of what I wanted to hear. Was that Marcus or McFeely or both of them were coming back?
Yeah. It is sort of surprising that they aren't. I mean, I don't know. I've only ever heard them as a pair, so it's sort of interesting that only one of them is back, and maybe Marcus will come back at a certain point.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So I'm with you. I think I'm always a writer first kind of person. So I think it's the way it's going to work, and I'm stoked about it. To a certain extent, it's like I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess is what I'll say.
Well, it's hard to be super excited, just in the sense of the business part of it, because you're like, they're making how much, when we know what Disney employees, who aren't famous make, and like that part is gross, but that's just gross on a macro level. It's not really, can I get mad at Robert Downey Jr. for like getting what he asked for? Not really.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
I'm like, it's not his fault that it's all corrupt and gross. But I've heard crazy things. I've heard that like he's getting like 100 million per movie for like like crazy things, like upfront. And I'm like, okay, like you better deliver. But he kind of always
I
does.
know.
Like he has so much fun. You could tell when he was up on that stage, like he was so happy to be back. Like he never really wanted to leave. You know,
Yeah.
he loves the attention. So, you know, we shall see. But I'm optimistic.
Yeah. And we have lots of time to keep speculating, so
Yep.
that'll be the fun. So, but yeah, so switching gears, we didn't get a ton of DC news out of Comic-Con, but
No.
we did get a trailer for Creature Commandos,
Yeah.
which I think looks fun. It definitely looks very of a piece with the Suicide Squad and stuff like that. But there was also a panel for Batman Cape Crusader where they showed the first episode, and hence then had to release the news about the first episode, which is that Minnie Driver is the Penguin in the first episode, and that Oswalda Cobblepot is a completely different version of the Penguin, and that I think like leads nicely into talking about this show, which is like visually, aesthetically, it's harkening back to the 40s and the original Bob Kane stuff, but the way they're telling the story, the kind of obviously, there are not everyone in the show is white or the same, the color that they usually are, the race they usually are. There's queer content in it, and it's just like, okay, so this is the 1940s,
right? As they
it's
see
even
it,
more aesthetically the 40s than Batman the Animated Series was, but it's way more progressive. I think that's such an interesting kind of juxtaposition.
Yes, it's definitely the Bridgerton thing of like it's the past, but it's a past through a modern lens of, because it's definitely the 40s. Like it's not like Batman the Animated Series had a 40s deco look, but they had video games and modern tech. Like it was definitely meant to be modern day, but this is definitely of a time. But yes, like we have people, there's like openly queer characters, which wouldn't just get you fired, it would get you killed. It's definitely an alt universe, and it's like, okay, they're doing that, fine. But I'll enjoy it. I think this is really, it's very interesting. I don't mind the reinventions. I mean, if anyone's allowed to reinvent Harley Quinn, it's her co-creator Bruce Timm. Like I think he gets to and no one should be able to be like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, that's his character, him and Paul Dini. So
yeah, I think once I really got into it, because you got a little time to get just used to the style and also the pacing. It's a little bit slower than other episodes or other shows. This version of Batman is maybe the most brusque of any version of animated Batman, certainly. But he has an arc too. He's not nice to Alfred up front, and then by the end, we understand that this is all kind of a show, and that he does need Alfred and all this stuff. And I found that really nice. There's the whole through line of like, he calls him Pennyworth instead of Alfred because he's trying to make it seem like he is it's not just I'm a kid who still depends on this guy. It's I'm the one in charge and all this stuff. I thought that was really nice. But yeah, so it's sort of if you're going to do another version of these, are all characters we've seen 7 billion times.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do something like that, I applaud that Bruce Timm didn't just go, well, let's just do basically what we did before, but a little bit different.
Yeah.
They went completely the other way. Like there's obviously a visual style that is similar. I mean, because Bruce Timm is Bruce Timm, but
for sure. Like I thought the visual look of it was very Batman the Animated Series. Like I thought he would change it, and it really does look more like the new Batman Adventures, like the second run from the. But it looks really just like that. Like he didn't change his style, so it really, the show feels to me like, okay, what if Batman the Animated Series, but like we made it today without network restrictions. That's what and we got to do whatever we wanted. And it doesn't lean too heavily into. Like it's not over the top violent or over the top adult, you know what I mean? Like it's not like we have like nudity or they're not dropping F-bombs all the time, but like they don't have to worry about like people saying shit or something like, like stuff that they would have had to worry about on Fox Kids. They just don't have to worry about that.
Dying outright. Like there's that.
And characters down, instead of implying, because the Batman the Animated Series implied a lot, but they had to imply because it was on weekday afternoons.
Right.
They don't have to worry about that now. So on that level, it's nice. It feels really like, oh, this is the comic book. Like, this is what they can get away with in comics. I love the look of Batman in this. I think I'll always sort of resist any other voice actor on some level that isn't Kevin Conroy.
Sure.
But my God, he does a really good job.
Yeah. I like him, yeah, because he's. I mean, it's Hamish Linklater, who of course was in Midnight Mass, among other things. I thought that was a really interesting choice. But what I like about his portrayal is that it is so kind of, I won't say robotic, but it is like he is clearly talking through filters in terms of like I'm hiding my true self and all, like all this stuff that I think is what is kind of interesting about Batman. It's not just, like Adam West is just anybody who like talked to Batman for 2 seconds would realize that that's Bruce Wayne. You know what I mean?
Right,
It's like there's no difference.
He doesn't do Kevin Conroy thing of Kevin Conroy had a very, very different voice for Bruce Wayne. His voice isn't as different as Bruce Wayne. I sort of feel like this Bruce Wayne doesn't care as much about he's more cocky and like no one's gonna figure this out.
Right.
Like he's a little bit more, I don't know. He's a darker Batman, than even the Batman the Animated Series one, but not in like an over the top way. Like, he still is someone who has a good side, and we see that with like the Robin, like the kids and all that later on.
I think the thing that like struck me about the visual style is obviously it's based on the original Bob Kane stuff, so the ears go out slightly and it's a little skinnier, but they kept the wrist gloves, and that is such a 40s aesthetic where like Batman's always had gloves, but they've been like gauntlets kind of stuff, and like this is it's straight up just like
the little gloves. I love it.
It's adorable.
And there's not like the Batcave is just like they didn't. It's like what a 40s Batcave would be like. There's not really any. There's no Bat computer because there were no computers. It's what it was back then. And I love it. I just think it's really well written. They have really good writers. It's like Ed Brubaker's a writer, Mark Bernardin's a writer. I'm missing a couple of people, but like really, and just the right balance of Greg Rucka is, I think, a writer. Yeah, like it's like people who have solid Batman resumes already. And it's just really, really good. And I like the mix of, we have a Penguin, we have a Harley, we have these established characters, but then they were like, let's do some real deep cut characters and do them our way. People like Gentleman Ghost. Who would have thought? Like, a character they tried to do a bunch of times in the old series, which was Natalia Knight, who is a vampire, and basically both Kids WB and Fox Kids were like, you cannot do vampires on weekday afternoon TV. And then they're like, oh well, now we can. And even though she's an energy vampire, but still, like they were like, let's do everything that we couldn't do back then. And I think it's just really well done. And I love Two-Face has a great arc. I mean, he's kind of the main arc of the season.
Yeah, there's a lot more stuff than I expected about like police corruption and because Bullock and Flass, who are Bullock of course was I think first from the animated series. I'm pretty sure.
I'm not sure. Montoya came from the animated show.
Yeah. Montoya definitely was. And then Flass of course was initially from Batman Year One. But basically like they both represent the kind of either lackadaisical at the very most positive or just outright corrupt versions of police officers.
Yes. And they're really corrupt. They're just straight up killing people. They
murder people. And Rupert Thorne ends up, which I think is interesting because it's not, I think, the movies are doing Falcone again, and Sal Maroni and stuff like that. And it's like Rupert Thorne was a character who was in a lot of the animated series. Was more of a businessman, but here he's sort of much more like an outright criminal, or like everybody kind of knows he is a wealthy, kind of guy who owns a lot of stuff in town, but everybody kind of knows he's a gangster,
Yeah.
which I think
And
is really
Rupert
cool.
Thorne predates Falcone by a lot of years in the comics.
By a lot, yeah.
Yeah, Falcone was or Falcone, whatever it is that they both movies have different pronunciations. It's a Frank Miller thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Batman Year One character that they keep coming back to.
Yeah, and then that Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale picked up on because Sophia Falcone, who's in The Penguin, we will of course have a Penguin episode in a month or two whenever that comes out, but that's a Long Halloween character. So I think that kind of stuff is, but they're doing that on the Batman Epic Crime Saga. But I was surprised that they were even willing to do as much about that. And, because a lot of the stuff, like one of the big changes is that Barbara Gordon is a public defender and not a college student or anything like that.
Yeah.
And her dad is the police commissioner, and they have like ideological differences. Like she, thinks that her dad's a good man, but that the system is bad and isn't working for the people and all this stuff. And it's like, by the end of it, she kind of has to be one of the quote unquote, the good guys or whatever, because of how corrupt the rest of the city is. And I thought that was really cool as like, because that's a huge change. Like I remember, I think it was in the first episode, we see her for the first time. And I was just like, oh, okay, here's what we're doing with Barbara.
Yeah. Barbara's pretty reinvented.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, because I mean, I'm sure at some point she's going to put on the suit. So what that journey is going to be, you're like, I mean, why have Barbara Gordon if she's never going to put on the Batgirl outfit? I'll be very interested to see how they do that. If they do. I mean, I think they have a second season for sure, like announced. I think they ordered 2 seasons. They have a second season, so that's good. But like, who knows how long it'll go after that. But yeah, I definitely want to see her as Batgirl because I love this version. This version of Barbara is really cool.
Yeah, me too. I really like, and I like that she was able to be, because she never, like you said, she's never Batgirl in the entire season. But there's that episode where like people think that bad guys have hired her or hired a hitman to kill her, but it's actually her dad, or maybe no, it's the other way around. I forget which. Doesn't matter.
Oh, when they blow up the police station.
Yeah.
When the penguin who's really ruthless in this, like she kills one of her kids.
Yeah.
Like they make her
and tries to kill the other one.
and tries to kill the other one. It's super crazy how ruthless the penguin is in this.
Yeah.
Because the penguin is not a character that's often scary. He's kind of a joke character.
Yeah. And this version of the penguin is physically imposing, is also much more ruthless, like you said, and is also like, but is also, owns the Iceberg Lounge, but also is the like entertainment as well. I was like, it's such an interesting take. And of course, Minnie Driver was the voice, and she's great.
She's great.
Yeah.
Oh my God, and we have to talk about Catwoman.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so let's just basically episode by episode and talk about who the villain was in each one. So second episode is Clayface, and they used the Basil Karlo version of Clayface, which I thought was really cool because, he's an actor who is basically using chemicals to try to enhance his performance and stuff like that, and enhance like the Man of 1,000 Faces angle. And I thought that was a really fun kind of like Baroque, Gothic style story. A really creepy, because initially when they released the picture of Clayface, I thought it was Jonah Hex, because that's kind of what he looks like.
Yeah.
But it's Clayface, and I really liked that Clayface, and also that like he's kind of a pitiful character in the same way that the one in the other show was. However, he's like stupid pitiful, like.
Yeah, and he's much more 40s because it's even the name Basil Karlo, it's like Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff kind of reference that they made him that kind of an actor, like the character actor who wasn't good looking enough to be a leading man, and like the bitterness that would ensue with all of that. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I enjoyed Clayface in this a lot. I mean, definitely less of a sci-fi version of Clayface.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Like, there's so much about Gothic horror in this whole series because you have just slightly. Because I was expecting in the Night Ride episode, which is the one where the gentleman ghost is. I literally thought it was we were gonna figure out it was like some Scooby-Doo style thing, but no, he's just legitimately a ghost.
Yep. I love that.
Me
I
too,
loved
but
it.
it was definitely a take, and I
Yeah.
really liked that because everything in the animated series is sci-fi, no matter, like, even the werewolf and the man bat, like, there are horror parts
Yes.
to it, but it's a sci-fi explanation.
Yeah, I don't think he ever dealt with like magic stuff really.
Mm-mm. Not until Justice League when
Yeah, not until Justice
Zatanna's
League.
in it or whatever. Well, actually,
Yeah.
Zatanna is in an episode of Batman the Animated Series, but
But everything that they showed with the Zatanna on the Batman show was she just showed him how to like be an escape artist. It
right.
wasn't until Justice League was like, oh, by the way, I know real magic.
You're right.
Like it was they kind of kept it sort of grounded.
Yeah.
But so yeah, after that was
the third episode is the Catwoman episode
with Christina Ricci as Catwoman, who is so great.
Yeah, it was really good.
So happy to see that outfit in something because it's never really made it into animation, or not a lot. Because it's a ridiculous, like, it's like you're running on rooftops in like, this dress, it's stupid and I love it and I don't care. I just wanted to see it in something, and that she's really like, the Batman the Animated Series kind of made Selina a little bit more like, I'm stealing from the wealthy to, there's a Robin Hood aspect to her. It's not in this. Like, she's just like stealing shit. And like, she gets off on it. You know what I mean? And I like that. I'm like, that's kind of what Catwoman really was for a long time, until they kind of made her an anti-hero. And this goes back to like she wasn't evil. She didn't want to hurt people, but like, she just liked stealing stuff.
Yeah.
And she just she could not resist. And there's just like this like playful cockiness to her, like in court. And like, she's like, yeah, no, I'm going to get away with this, and I loved it. I loved her performance. I hope we see her in the second season.
Me too. I was sort of, no, well, I mean, because there's only, other than Harvey Dent, like nobody else is really in multiple episodes.
No.
And he has the big arc, which is why. But I was like, oh, we only get one Catwoman episode? That stinks. But hopefully she'll be back for the next season.
Yeah.
She is super fun. And I love the fact that she has, she lives in a mansion and has a maid and stuff like that. And then when she loses all her money, she goes and lives in this crappy hovel with all of her like million cats and her maid, who's just like, oh gosh,
that maid was a great character. Everything that they did with her was really cool. It was really funny. Like, I loved it. Because again, like, the comics have really leaned into her as anti-hero. This year it's more like sympathetic villain. Like, she's not evil, but like, she's not really looking out for anyone else.
No. And I liked Selina's repartee with Bruce Wayne also.
Yes.
Like, and how Wayne is kind of onto her immediately. Like, well, obviously he knows that she is a criminal who keeps getting released from prison because of reasons.
For reasons,
but yeah, I thought that was really great. Episode 4 is the first big police corruption episode, where the mayor, who we also know is corrupt. The big through line of the season is also that Harvey Dent is running he's a district attorney, but he's running for mayor opposite Mayor Jessup. And one of the only things that he can hope to, he gets further and further in with Rupert Thorne, basically.
Yeah.
But in episode 4, the current mayor assembles a task force to catch Batman, and Detective Montoya is put in charge, and Flass and Bullock decide that they're going to take Batman out, basically, and then they release Firebug from Arkham to basically lure the Batman out, and that's what happens. And Firebug was interesting because that's the joke, is that everyone goes, who's Firebug? I've heard of Firefly.
Firefly, yeah. Firefly is the more famous. Firefly, who's also kind of a D-lister, but like, even he's more famous than Firebug.
Absolutely.
But there's that's, again, it's a comics accurate thing. There's a Firebug who's a pyro, Batman villain.
Yeah.
That they just pulled out of the drawer.
And he's also one of the few, because he died. I mean, he legitimately dies. Flash shoots him. Where it's like, okay, it is technically a Batman like super villain or costume villain, but it's not gonna break anybody's heart that he's never going to come back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no one's gonna care.
He was a good.
It's
He
a
was a
little
good
bit
voice for that.
heartbreaking with Two-Face spoilers, but even then, I'm like, he has a complete arc.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's like, I don't know what else they're going to do with him that's going to be better than like what he had this season. You know, for a show that isn't going to have like 100 episodes like Batman the Animated Series did.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's okay to give some characters an ending. You know, no one cares that Harvey Dent died in The Dark Knight because
he had an arc.
He had an arc. Yeah.
Yeah. Episode 5 is the Harley Quinn episode. So the interesting thing about the Harley episode, so, you know, we get a lot of police stuff. We get a lot of Detective Montoya, and she and Barbara are friends. And also Barbara is friends with Dr. Harleen Quinzel, who throughout the first few episodes is like, you know, needed to be Bruce's psychiatrist when he, you know, I forget why.
He punches somebody.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
He basically assaults someone.
Yeah.
And so he's on probation and he has to do therapy.
Yeah.
And someone for saying like a snide remark about his parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was in the Catwoman episode because he had his mother's pearls on display at the thing, and somebody was like, you know, something snidely about, well, glad to get the blood off or whatever.
Right.
And so he just clocks the guy one. So he gets put in, he has to go see Dr. Harleen Quinzel. And Jamie Chung plays her and is so like bubbly and upbeat and kind of silly. And I think that's such an interesting take on her, but she's still like buttoned up.
Yes.
And then she starts to have the very beginnings of a romantic relationship with Detective Montoya. And I found that really, really fascinating.
Yep.
Because then when you find out that she is actually Harley Quinn, who has been brainwashing rich guys specifically, and kind of driving them insane under the guise of this clown with a porcelain face, completely different visual look, like
totally different,
red and black anywhere, like it's black and yellow and green, I think.
And I mean, let's talk about, like, most importantly, absolutely no relation to the Joker. There's nothing to do with the Joker in her, or there is no Joker yet in this show. Spoilers.
Yeah.
I mean, not really.
He's in it for 1 second at the very end.
But like, she has nothing to do with him, which is interesting because I think that's the first time they've divorced Harley from the Joker in her origin story. And it's cool. Like, I like her in this. It's, you know, it's a different Harley. It's not the Harley that we're used to. But it's cool. Like, you know, we've had, like you said, we've had so many versions of these characters. You know, why not do something weird? You know?
Yeah. And she was a character that was introduced 50 years after the comic started. And so, like, there's only been about 30 years of Harley Quinn just existing. Yes. And so, like, I think the fun idea is that because there so much was different in the Golden Age, they were like, well, what would have been different about Harley had she been in the Golden Age? I think that's a really fun idea because then you see that, like, she, you know, she's trying to get back. There's a lot of like weird political stuff in this too, which is that, like, there's a lot of eat the rich and sentiment from the villains, which I think is really fascinating because they've amped it up even more than it always was. Which is
it's like a post-depression world, assuming, you know, it's that, like, there would be that. Yeah. A lot of Golden Age comics had that, especially Superman. They had that kind of ethos in them, which is, you know, they all came out the tail end of the Depression. And so that's there.
Yeah, because Lex Luthor being like a mad scientist or, you know, whatever, that was a Silver Age idea. I believe he was always he was like the mayor, or no, he was like Boss Tweed. Like, he was basically just a wealthy guy, you know, corrupt bad guy. That was the funniest thing about Golden Age Superman, is that you have the most powerful being on Earth fighting bank robbers and stuff.
Bank robbers and stuff. Yeah, it wasn't until the Silver Age that they really, you know, figured it out. What's that noise? Can you hear all that noise?
I can.
Oh,
I can cut it out.
Okay.
It's all good.
And then after Harley we get, oh god, who's in number?
Let's see if you can figure it out. I have the list up.
Who's after Harley? I want to
go ahead. It's a fun game for Noah.
Yeah, I know, because I watched them all in like 2 days. I want to say it's not Nocturne.
No,
it's not.
But it's the other one similar.
Is it Gentleman Ghost?
It's Gentleman Ghost, yeah.
Okay. I dug that episode a lot. Written by Mark Bernardin, who I think a lot of people would know as Kevin Smith's bestie from, I mean, he's an accomplished writer, but
yes, of course.
But co-host of his podcast. And he does a great job because it's completely like, it's just, yeah, he's a ghost. There's no, like you said, there's no Scooby-Doo to it. Like he's just, but he created, again, the whole like class rivalry thing, like, but it comes up again in this episode because it's like, I hate the poor. I only steal from the poor.
Yeah.
Because I'm a ghost of a rich person who believes I'm entitled to things. I'm like, that's not in the original comic. Like that character's kind of nothing in the original. He's not even really a Batman villain. He's a Hawkman villain.
Right.
That Batman fought like here and there,
Well, it's a silly concept because, like, which you alluded to, like Eric wrote a good piece for us if you want to go read it about the 3 kind of very low D-list villains that got revamped for this. And Gentleman Ghost, I think, is the most interesting of the ones because it was a guy with a mask, or like his face was invisible, but not really. But like he had a top hat on. Yeah, he was just clothes, and that's a gimmick for a comic book. It's like, oh, I'm not going to draw a head. He's just a monocle and a hat, and it's funny. But here,
and he appears that way in Justice League Unlimited because he's a very minor Legion of Doom character, and he's there, but like it's just that it's just a floating hat. It's so stupid.
But here he's sort of like a highwayman style character who's masked and has a 3-corner hat and is not unlike Dr. Sin or like some of these other like older timey characters, but yeah, it's like you'd think, oh, maybe he's a Robin Hood type character. No, he's the opposite. He steals from the poor and gives to the rich, which is him, because he resents the poor for like the way his family was treated and everything like that. And it's a really interesting because like the Waynes are an old money family, and I think that is a really fascinating kind of dichotomy there because like Bruce Wayne, and it's just kind of been the way with Batman for a long time, which is like once people realize like, oh, Batman's a trust fund kid, he's like he's a 1%er, and yet he is supposedly he's beating up all these mentally ill poor people, and it's like, okay,
it would not fly. That's one of the great things in Dark Knight Returns. A lot of people who love Batman would hate him in real life.
Yeah,
like just the idea of that would send people, liberal people like myself, like
of course,
over them. Like we would be like, how dare even if but there's a great thing in Dark Knight Returns when like there's a lot of the talking heads of like people on the street, like, and they would talk to like white liberals and they'd be like, oh, he's terrible, da, da, da. But then they talk to the actual people in the neighborhood, like often people of color, like, thank you for like coming and doing stuff because the police don't help us, so I think that's a great, like, there would be 2 sides to that. I think a lot of people who wouldn't live in neighborhoods like that would feel judgment, and be a little bit on a pedestal about talking about such things, and people who were under threat of violence would probably be grateful for him.
I even like the movie The Batman, which I adore. When it first was beginning, when I first saw it, and there's the whole really great sequence, but like that ends with him beating up the street gang, the like Two-Face street gang. All of that voiceover, he mentions the element and stuff like that, talking about criminals, and it's just sort of like, oh, that's such a gross way to refer to people, and like but you kind of get like he's kind of fashioning himself as this for kind of a Rorschach type figure, and I think that like that works for that movie because by the end of that he has to be a source of hope and everything like that. But it is, you're absolutely right, it is sort of like, what is this guy like? Should we like him?
And he's scarier even as a kid. I think one of my favorite moments in this whole show, I don't remember what episode it is, we get the the inevitable flashback to Bruce as a kid, and he's just up all night. It's the day his parents are murdered.
Yes.
He walks into Alfred's room. He just stands there and stares at him, and he's like, I'm gonna make them all pay, and you're gonna help me. And I'm like, and then Alfred looks terrified of this child. And I'm like, okay, I'm so on board with this show. Like that this version of Bruce has been scary since the moment his parents were killed.
Yeah.
Loved that.
They obviously never. Well, they did actually. I was going to say they never really got into his like psyche, but they do in that episode where he has to go talk to Harley, because that is a huge thing about Batman that people kind of allude to more nowadays, which is that he is, if not for his moral compass, he would be it could be just as bad as the people he's putting away. And that's kind of the whole point. And, when people like certain directors of movies say like, well, Batman would kill people. Why? That makes no sense that he wouldn't kill people. It's like, that's why he's goddamn Batman. If Batman killed people, he'd be the Punisher. And that's not an interesting character,
Right. And I mean, it's also one of those things that's just like the suspension of disbelief, because whether he meant to kill people or not, accidentally at some point he would.
Sure.
Like there's no way you hit that many people in the head without one of them, like, but in the fantasy world, we accept that this guy's a genius and he knows how to take out all these people without causing them, fatal harm. But realistically, he would, even if he didn't mean to, one of them's going to die,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the difference. That's why he's not the Punisher. That's one of my favorite movie moments from JLA Avengers, that crossover, is when he's in like the Marvel Earth and like he finds out about the Punisher and there's all these world-ending stakes going on. He's like, "Excuse me, I need a minute," like, because he cannot stand the idea of the Punisher. Like, I get what you're doing, but you're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Something they'd later explore with Jason Todd. Because Jason Todd is basically the Punisher.
He's basically the Punisher. Yeah.
But yeah, like that, they really do get into like how mentally screwed up he is.
Well, they even do that in this, like where he like gets really mad at the idea of having a gun, like, and just like, are you pointing a gun at people? Like, he just absolutely hates guns. And that is what Batman is. That's why he doesn't kill people. That's why he doesn't shoot people, at the very least. Even though in the night, and I was kind of glad that they kept that, because I was thinking like, well, initially he did have guns back in the very
early day, in the first year he did.
But I'm glad they didn't do that, because that's just less interesting, I think, by and large. But also like keep a few things that we know about Batman as a character.
I mean, the Batman himself in this is in some ways the least changed. Like, he's pretty much Batman as we know Batman. He's a little bit darker, but he's certainly not any darker than he is in the Batman.
Sure.
Like it's not something we've never seen before. Mm-hmm. It's mostly the supporting cast and the villains that are the most transformed. Batman is more or less Batman, for the most part.
Because even Alfred is like obviously he's drawn a little bit differently than he normally is. And Jason Watkins' performance, I just think it's great.
Yeah.
It's much more like upbeat and jovial, like kind of silly almost, or just kind of but that relationship is still core to the entire kind of ethos of Batman. Which I love. But so the Gentleman Ghost episode I think is really fun. And then at the end, like it took me a while to realize, he is just a ghost, and Batman's gonna have to do like some supernatural shit to try to get rid of him.
I am remembering now, there is one episode of Batman the Animated Series that deals with supernatural stuff with Etrigan the Demon.
Oh, sure, of course.
They did that late in the game. Late in the game, they were like, and I thought we were going to see him in this, because at the end of the Gentleman Ghost episode, they go to like a magic shop, but it's I forget what character it is, but it's a comics character. But I thought it was going to be Jason Blood. I thought Jason Blood was going to be his like contact in that world. Yeah. But it was somebody else that I know is from like, I think it's like a Wildstorm character. I cannot remember now.
God, it's Brother Midnight, isn't it?
Yes, Brother Midnight, and I'm trying to remember what that character's from. But they did not make him up for the show. He's a DC character.
Yeah, he is. 1 second. Brother Midnight. Is that his name? Is it Brother Midnight?
I think so.
Midnight.
It's not Dr. Midnight. That's a difference.
DC Comics. Come on now.
Is it not him?
It's Papa Midnight.
Papa Midnight.
There
from what? From Swamp Thing or Hellblazer, or one of those, I think.
It was Hellblazer initially.
It's Hellblazer. It was a
Constantine character,
It's a Constantine character. Okay. So, I thought that was going to be Jason Blood, but that was cool. It was a cool deep cut to make it Papa Midnight. who's in the movie. I think there's a pop of midnight in the Constantine movie with Keanu Reeves. Like he appears.
Yeah, from what it looks like, that's where he started, was in the movie.
Is it where he started? Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So then
very
he
interesting.
definitely wouldn't have been around for the 1940s, but hey.
Nope.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because there, like we were mentioning, there are a lot of it's the kind of rose-colored glasses version of the past.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gordon's black, Barbara's black, therefore. Harleen is Asian. Lucius Fox is still black, but is also a lawyer. He's not at all the kind of character. He's Bruce's lawyer and Harvey's lawyer too, which is weird.
Yeah.
Flass is black, and I don't remember if he was in the comic or not.
No.
Flass was also in Batman Begins, and was just a big fat white guy. Was basically Harvey Bullock.
It was basically Harvey Bullock, yeah.
And so there's a lot of that stuff where, like, you know, in real 1940, a black man would not be the commissioner of police. Like, there's no way.
No, and I mean, and I get why people of color of all kinds. Like, I mean, I'll speak for myself as a queer person. I always feel a little weird when it's, you know, the past, and it's like, oh, and there's just this queer person gets a position of power, which I know fully well they would have never had.
Right.
And there's a wish fulfillment part of that. Like, wouldn't it be cool? And I think that works in a fantasy type scenario. Like, it's, you know, it's Batman, it's fine, you know. But like, I do get why some people wouldn't necessarily want to see a rose-colored glasses version of the past. You know, I'm okay with it. Like, I get, like, it's like, okay, this is you know,
yeah, it's still
like
fantasy.
Harley,
like,
it's just it's still fantasy. So I'm like, whatever. But there's a part of me that at least I can only speak to the stuff that applies to me. At least with the queer stuff, I'm always like that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, I saw it with Stranger Things in season 5. I got into some arguments with people because there are a lot of people who wanted Will to come out, you know, and profess his love for whoever, you know, and I'm like, he's 14 in 1980, whatever. That's not happening. I can tell you, as someone who was around that age at that time, that's not happening. And they're like, but it's an alt world. I'm like, okay, yes and no. Like, everything about the culture and politically of Stranger Things is the real world history with this one supernatural element that is added into it. You know, so there, that bothered me. In this, it doesn't, because it's so heightened. This is such a heightened world in Batman that it's like, okay, whatever. It's an alt history. Whereas in Stranger Things, it annoyed me. Like, it annoyed me that people wanted that. Like, they just sort of wanted to see, you know, I don't know what service that necessarily does to younger people to learn, you know, to see a past that wasn't, you know, I think it's more important to learn how hard it was. You know, but other people have different opinions, and I respect that. You know, I respect that some people want to see a version of things that was better. But yeah, it's a bold choice for them to go there. You know, I mean, not so much with Commissioner Gordon, that's been done now, but like,
right, exactly. It was more the setting, but the fact that, first of all, that Detective Montoya is a detective. Like, initially she was just Officer Montoya,
right?
So it's a woman who is a full police detective, and then she and Harley go out on a date.
Yeah,
in the middle of the day, but it's still like, you know, it's pretty clear that's what's going on and everything like that. So I was just, it was more just kind of like, all right, good for you guys. This is what you're doing.
Yeah. I totally didn't have a problem with it once I realized, like, okay, that's what they're doing. Fine. Yeah. You know.
So after the Gentleman Ghost episode, we have episode 7, which is Moving Target. So Moving Target is the one where everybody thinks that Commissioner Gordon is the target, but it's actually Barbara, which is really a fun idea. And so, like, you know, they go to like a safe house and all the stuff, and the character who is leading the charge of the assassins is Onomatopoeia, which is a Kevin Smith character, which is so strange.
Green Arrow. He's so happy. He's like, my character's on this show. He's just like thrilled that like something he did made the canon, so to speak. But yeah, he is a Green Arrow character. Yeah.
Well, and Kevin Smith had always said, like, this is a character who only works in comics because, you know, I'm saying words out loud that are sound effects, and it's like you read it either way, but you're that's what he says.
Yeah.
But like I feel like they did make it work for
Yeah.
the show. Like
They
he's
did.
basically just a guy in a, you know, in a trench coat and a fedora, but he has the black mask with the kind of
The swirl.
swirl on it. And it's played by Reed Scott, which is like, they got like an actual, like, because Reed Scott was on Veep. It's like you got a character or like an actor who
Just to
just say
say
noises.
bang, to say bang.
Yeah, which is very funny to me.
Yeah, it's great.
But I really liked that episode because like the big thing is like there's only a few detectives that the Gordons can actually trust, you know, Montoya being one of them, but then there's this other guy who at the end you find out he's also on the take and almost succeeds in killing her and then doesn't, and Batman shows up and all this stuff. But like that is one of the episodes where it's like, oh boy, like Flass and Bullock are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of how corrupt Gotham Police Department is.
Yeah, it's pretty much everyone's corrupt except for the Gordons.
Yeah. You know, because even by the end, like Two-Face sort of goes, it's just you guys against the world, which is a really like horrible thing to hear. But but I thought that episode was really great. And then episode 8 is Nocturne, which is the one where you know, the last 3 episodes are heavily about Harvey Dent as well.
Yes.
And so he has this you know, school picnic or whatever at night at a carnival, which is very weird. But Dr. Leslie Tompkins brings like her patients, or, you know, her orphans. And you wrote a piece about this too, but like they all have names that reference Robin characters. And I think that is such a funny thing.
I mean, if they wanted to, I don't know what they're going to do, but like that Dick Grayson, it looks identical to the design of Dick Grayson in Batman the Animated Series. Like they want us to think that's Dick Grayson.
Yeah.
The others a little less so, but not by much. Like if they want to make them the Robins, they can. If they want to ignore it and introduce Dick Grayson later, like they don't have last names. So, but it feels so deliberate. And I think it's a kind of an opportunity to do something fun with the Robin concept if they want to.
Yeah.
You know, like they could do something cool there.
Yeah, they could do, you know, because there's a thing in Sherlock Holmes, which is that, you know, the Baker Street Irregulars, which is basically, which it's been done a million times, which initially was like, you know, street urchins and beggars and stuff like that were kind of like his eyes and ears on the street. That has sort of been, you know, changed to like, you know, like the BBC Sherlock series with Benedict Cumberbatch did drug addicts.
Right.
But there's a version of it, I forget the name of the show, but there was a show on Netflix, short-lived. I think it might have just been called Baker Street, but that used little kids. And I think it would be kind of cool to like, what if Batman's little, you know, like cadre
is just, like this.
My Robins are out there getting information and stuff. I think that would be kind of an interesting idea.
I think that would be fun. There was a comic of not that long ago during New 52 era, which was just called The Robins. And it was just it was sort of that. It was just a bunch of like his eyes and ears on the street kind of thing of these kids. I'm like, that would be a fun way to do it. I think it would be a little, I think with Dick Grayson, I think we sort of have expectations more, but like, it would be fun. Like just do that. Like, you know, I don't know. And I would love it if they wore their goofy original Golden Age costumes, because it is the 40s and it would be appropriate.
Yeah. Well, I also like that. So one of them is Jace, who's clearly Jason Todd, has red hair, which is what Jason did initially have red hair.
Originally had red hair. Yeah.
And then he shellacked it black so that he would look more like Dick Grayson. I thought that was such a fun idea.
Yeah. And he's noticeably younger than the other, you know, like they did things that were like, they could play with this if they want to later. You know, if they definitely, and Leslie Tompkins is there, like that's a major character from the comics and the animated series. So I think that was fun. And like, I thought Natalia Knight was a fun, you know, I mean, totally reinvented, because in the 80s, she was like a Morticia Adams type person. And now they're like, okay, well, what if she's Wednesday? Like, you know, which I thought was fun. So that was a cool one.
Yeah. And is voiced by McKenna Grace, who of course was in every horror thing. She was, she's in Ghostbusters, but she was also in Haunting of Hill House, and just she's
legit creepy. She's like, she can do creepy well.
Yeah.
And they didn't kill her off, so she could come back.
That was a fun episode, or like a really interesting episode. And it also, like, you know, because it was a Carney episode. Sorry, people who work at carnivals. But like Waylon Jones was there. Is that his name? Yeah, Waylon Jones.
It's Killer Croc. Yeah.
Yeah, Killer Croc. And there was I think one or two other characters that was like, oh, it's him or her or whatever, whoever. But now I don't remember. But the killer, you see a guy who's an alligator man, like that's
Yeah.
clearly Killer Croc, and I even call him Waylon at one point.
Yeah.
Um, I
There's
thought that
name
was
drops to some
yeah,
characters. Jonathan Crane gets a name drop. Like
yeah,
so we'll see him probably at some point.
yeah.
I don't know who else got one, but that was the one I'm like, oh, that's a big major A-list Batman villain that we'll probably see later.
Yeah. But all of this sort of like, her, life sucking sounds gross. All of these kids and like them going missing and stuff like that really puts a damper on Dent's, what it was supposed to be a photo op. And then of course,
Right.
Rupert Thorne's like putting the boot down even more onto his neck. And then we get episodes 9 and 10, which are, effectively just the Two-Face episodes. But yeah, so the number 9 is called the Killer Inside Me, and that's where he breaks down and becomes Two-Face officially. And then episode 10 is they're trying to keep him safe because he has killed or has attempted murder on several people. He's killed a few people, but he's also tried to kill Rupert Thorne, and obviously he's out. So I thought that was such a fun idea because like he's still Two-Face. He's still demonstrably Two-Face. He uses the coin. He is of two minds. Like literally, he goes, "Why did I say that?" kind of stuff. He still looks like Two-Face. It's the right side that's messed up instead of the left side, but I mean, it's effectively the same. But he's also still Harvey Dent, and they still, Batman and Barbara try to keep him safe because he's the one who's going to testify and bring down everybody. And
well, what I liked about this Harvey too, he's kind of already shitty as Harvey, like which they've never really done. Like whether it's the Dark Knight or Batman, like he was sometimes quick to anger, but he was basically a good dude. And like this one's like not really that good of a dude.
No,
when he's Harvey, he's kind of shitty.
Yeah.
So it sort of is more realistic in that way that like, what are the odds that like a very good person would have this accident and then suddenly become evil? This is more like somebody who's kind of already bad would then just completely lean into their bad side in the way that this did. Like I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. And he like legit tries to kill like Rupert Thorne's son and stuff like that. Like he does some pretty bad stuff. But it's also like you kind of understand where he's coming from. And I've always said like my favorite, I won't say the best, but my favorite Batman villains, especially as done in the animated series, but elsewhere too, are the ones that have truly tragic, like you understand where they're coming from. They've just gone a different direction.
Yeah.
There's only, sometimes I like the Penguin, sometimes not, but he's effectively just a criminal. And like the Joker's a crazy person. I'm never sympathetic for the Joker, but like, the Matt Hagen Clayface, Mr. Freeze as done in the animated series, Two-Face especially, even Man-Bat to a certain extent, like they are tragic figures who have just kind of fallen into, their own madness, but also like just society at large is like kind of pushed them to the point where they have to do this kind of stuff or feel like they have to do this stuff. And this, this was a really great way to do something different with Two-Face. Like he is basically much more of like, smarmy, like, he's on the take as well, but I think at his heart was still trying to do good. He just was bad about it.
Yeah.
And then he gets, his accident, quote unquote. And then he's starting to kind of just fall to the dark side. And I like how little they change his face. Like he's Two-Face, but it's not discolored. It's just, he's clearly been in an accident. That's the only difference.
Yeah. And I like that he has like this relationship with Barbara where she sees through his bullshit. Like, even before, like, she's like, she knows what he's all about,
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. And so much of it comes from him just absolutely getting shut out basically of the mayor's race. Like it's not even a question anymore that he's not going to win. And that just breaks him. And I think that's like, that's really a sad story. So he dies at the end of the episode, at the season, but like, I think he's done really well. And that whole sequence where Batman and Barbara and Jim Gordon and Montoya eventually are trying to keep him safe from all these assassins, and then like Flass and Bullock are also there, and like
Yeah.
also, and I think one of them is the one who shoots him. Ultimately, I just thought that was all great. Like that last episode is just dynamite, I think.
Yeah, it was really good.
And
I mean, it
then
left me wanting more. Like, I
yeah,
just want more. I
exactly.
want more of this show, like immediately. What do you think about how they dropped them all at once? Like, do you think that's good or bad? I kind of usually don't like that, but with this show, I kind of am okay with it.
Yeah, I kind of like the way that, although they've kind of gone away from that sometimes, but like where initially, most Prime shows, they'll drop 3 and then they'll go to weekly. I like that aspect, get them hooked basically.
Yeah, me too.
Um, and I don't know if it's a function of, because we got them all at once anyway, so we didn't have to wait at all. And so
Yeah.
like maybe that's just like that's the way we watched it. So I'm like, oh, that's the fine way to do it. I think it could have worked either way. I don't think they did a disservice to the show by doing it all at once, but I do
No, I
think
don't
that
either. Because
if you
it's
watch them
not.
more spread out, it's also fine.
Yeah, I think unlike X-Men 97, it's not heavily serial. There's certain serialization, but it's not heavily serialized.
Yeah.
They're kind of one and dones for the most part.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like, it would have benefited necessarily from that, like, anticipation for the next one in the way that something like X-Men did. Like, I'm kind of okay with it. Although it would have been fun, of course we saw them all at once, but like I think it would have been fun to have that conversation going. Like, what will happen? Will people still be talking about Cape Crusader a week from now when everyone's seen them all? It's more about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always like, well, I guess just from work. But like X-Men 97 was huge both for us and also, for us as fans to watch. Like it was it was our big, I think it'll still probably go down. We'll see what the Penguin is like, and it looks good, but we don't know yet.
Yeah.
But like even more so than Deadpool and Wolverine, which we both loved, but like I think X-Men 97 was like, okay, this is great. This is exactly what I want from comic book storytelling, just all that stuff.
Yeah.
And like Batman Cape Crusader doesn't get to those highs. But it's not that far off. It's doing its own thing. And I do think
doing
that
its own thing.
It deserves to have more time, I guess, in the spotlight.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. It's more about like, will it get the attention it deserves?
Yeah.
I do think it's very interesting that, like, we've said it many times, the two most important superhero cartoons maybe ever, but definitely of the 90s, that both debuted within a month of each other is Batman the Animated Series and X-Men the Animated Series. And that one got a literal sequel, and Batman is definitely a spiritual sequel to the original, and that they're both so good. Like, how lucky are we? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I know
that these both worked, like, and were good.
Yeah.
Like, the odds were not in the favor of both of them being good.
No. Boy, you're right. Like, and it could have gone either way. And like when they first showed the key art for Batman Cape Crusader, I was like, it's different, but it's not that different. I don't kind of want this. And we talked about it in the episode that we did about it, but like, I was definitely cautious about X-Men 97. I was like, are you just trying to get nostalgia? And they do, but then they did their own thing about it. So yeah, I completely agree.
Same with this, which is not a literal sequel, but it's definitely same creatives. I mean, it's definitely it looks like Batman the Animated Series in a lot of ways. And that they're both so good.
Yeah.
Like, we were really lucky that it turned out like that. And it also reminded us, I think, that animation just lets you do stuff with superhero stories that just live action never really will. Like, there's a limit to what you can do in live action and not look stupid or not take you out of it. Animation doesn't have that problem. And it just kind of makes me want more. I think I did a piece on it. I think it was like, give me more period piece, superhero stuff. Like, there's great, like there's some characters that work in a specific time and place, like, really well. And Batman is one of them.
I think that's why what you mentioned earlier, why I'm most excited for the Fantastic Four movie is like the Fantastic Four to me is a 60s ass comic, and that's why it's fun.
It's their heyday.
Yeah.
Like, and for sure. Like, I would love to see, I'd love to see a Fantastic Four cartoon set in the 60s. I'd love to see, there's just a lot of eras where you're just like, this is when that comic was cooking the most, and had the most cultural relevancy, like why not set a show during that period, and talk about what that time period means with hindsight, you know? I don't even remember what I said for my piece like anymore, like which ones I did, but like
I'm trying to remember now. I mean, I could pull it
I
up,
think
but
I did the Justice League in like the 70s because that was sort of like the Bronze Age, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think
but
you
like
did
there's just a lot of potential there.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either, and I wrote it.
Eric, you write a lot of pieces.
I wrote a lot of pieces. I'd start to forget that I did them. Luke, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, I will say the one thing, I won't say it's a misgiving, it's a tease for the next season. We see just ever so briefly the guise of the Joker with the, you know, the hat on. It's clearly very Killing Joke inspired, at least visually.
Yeah.
And I'm so tired of the Joker. I'm just tired of him. I know he's super important to the Batman mythos and everything like that. And he's a very popular character. I just don't want him around anymore. I just don't think we need him.
I get what you're saying. I don't feel that strongly. I'm glad he wasn't in the first season. I don't know how you do a whole Batman thing and not have him. Like it just sort of feels like at some point you kind of have to. There's other Batman villains I want to see first, like A-listers. Like I want to see what is Ra's al Ghul in this world. What is, you know? I think I kind of have an idea about what the Riddler. I don't think the Riddler is one of those characters that would change that much. But they could. So yeah, I want to see some of those other characters before I see the Joker, but inevitably, like they sort of have to do him. I just hope that they, you know, it's hard to find a new take on the Joker. Like he's the most.
That's the other thing.
You know, he's either just a clown or Hannibal Lecter, or you know what I mean. It's like there's really only a couple of versions of this character you can do, you know, and that's why he's lasted as long as he has. But yeah, I hope that they don't overdo it. Like I hope he comes in the end of second season. Like I hope they tease him throughout and he doesn't show up until the very end. You know.
Yeah. Or like, you know, if he's got like a 2-episode arc and that's it, I'd be fine with that too. Yeah. Like I just don't want the whole season to be about the Joker. That's kind of my thing.
No, I don't want that either.
I don't want him to be the Harvey Dent of that season because like I just don't find that interesting. And
no,
he works in small doses is my take on it. Because even like, you know, I just did a whole video about the Batman cartoon, which is 20 years old now. And the Joker is by far in it the most, but he's in 19 episodes of the 65 episodes. So that's still, you know, less than a third of the episodes.
He did that many of that show?
Yeah, he did. He just kind of shows up a lot too.
I that's one of those shows I should revisit because at the time I was just
like, I really like it.
Really, like at the time I was just like not.
Exactly. I never watched it at the time because I was just like, this isn't Kevin Conroy. This isn't, you know, whatever. But now I think especially the first 2 seasons, they're so different.
Yeah.
That you can kind of go, okay, this is just a different take. You know what I mean? And it doesn't have the stigma of being hot on the heels of Batman the Animated Series, and also the Justice League stuff still going on at the time.
Yeah, that was very weird. I remember at the time.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, but this is still happening. Like, why are you doing like, you know, 2 versions?
Yeah.
Like at the time I was like, Kevin Conroy is very much alive. Like, why would you have anyone else do it? You know, at the time I just couldn't get it. But you know, maybe I'll have different feelings looking at it now.
Yeah, I mean it's a very different show, and I think that once it starts to as the seasons go along, seasons 3, 4, and 5 more so, 5 especially. I don't really like 5. You can skip 5 entirely, but the problem with 5 is that they were like, well, let's make a Justice League, where the Leaguers come in and it's just like why do this when you have this awesome Batman who doesn't need the Justice League, and that was the thing about the Justice League series. It's like, can this Batman work in Justice League? And they made him work because there aren't any just Batman episodes.
And he's not always there either. Like he's there when the story suits, but they need Batman. Yeah. Like he just was, they didn't constantly use him. Yeah. There is a Superman Easter egg in Caped Crusader. Because I noticed now? I noticed that whenever they had like the press like out, that is definitely Lois from the Fleischer cartoons. like among the
Oh,
press, and I'm
didn't
like,
notice.
is that just like a cute little wink? Or like, I mean, it could be anything. Like next season, they could be like, "Oh yeah, this is the same universe as the Fleischer cartoons,"
Sure,
and that Superman shows up. I would love that.
that would be rad. That would be really
Yeah,
rad.
I know that would be so cool because I'm like, they own that, so that would be
Yeah,
really fun. She doesn't talk, but it's absolutely the same design.
that's so funny. I didn't notice that. I'll have to watch that again.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to watching this again now that it's out and watching it on not my computer screen.
Yes,
it'd be really nice.
I did hook it for this show. I did hook up my laptop to my TV because I'm like, I don't want to watch this on my. I'm like, I want to watch this on my TV. I want to watch this on my 70-inch TV.
Yeah.
I usually don't do that with screeners. Like I just watch them on my laptop. But with this one, I'm like, nope. It's Batman.
I must watch it.
Yeah.
Folks, please let us know what you think of Batman Cape Crusader. Did you like it as much as we do, or are you a weirdo? You probably
There's some weirdos. Some people are mad. Some people are big mad online.
Of course there are.
Of course they are. But like, I'm like, what's wrong with you? This show's good. Like, if you love Batman.
Some people were big mad. We're getting back to what we were talking about a little earlier, but like when House of the Dragon came out, that the Valerians, the family, were all black actors, and it's like that doesn't make any sense. And it's like it's a show with dragons. It's not a real place.
It's not a real place. It doesn't matter.
What are you mad about? Just that black people exist? Because that's a problem unto itself.
Yeah.
But anyway, please let us know. Write to me at laserfocus@nerdist.com and just send in questions of anything at all. I would love to do a mailbag episode at some point because those seem like fun. We haven't done one yet, but they seem like fun. Eric, how can people find your stuff on the internet?
Mainly on I'm at Geekboy Eric on Twitter still, where I will post all the time about nerdy things, and of course daily on Nerdist.com.
Yeah, you can find me on Letterboxd, Kyle_Anderson. You can read everything that I do on Nerdist.com as well. Eric, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. Join me again next time on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit Nerdist.com.